Miles Jenner, head brewer and joint managing director of Harvey's, and 25 years ago, on the day of the flood, I was standing where I am now. Well, it had been an incredibly wet year, and we had had a month's rainfall in 48 hours. We had equinox high tides, we had strong winds, and the river had been pretty sort of turbulent all week. So on the day of the flood, strangely, there was calm. The sun shone, there was high water, and I think it was only when I wandered into the garden at about midday next to the brewery and heard the birds going absolutely berserk that I realised that we were at odds with nature and something was going to happen. And the river literally built up on the other side of the wall, and then it burst through the ground as water does. So we went from having a dry floor in the brewery to 6 foot of river water in the space of 15 minutes. I am an eternal optimist, so we'd brewed that day, and we'd dropped the strong worts down to the hopbacks on the ground floor. We'd pumped them up for cooling, and then we'd drop the weaker sugars that we used to dilute the brew down to the hopback. So they were anchored to the ground with boiling hot, very weak sugars. So when the water came in, they were secure, but other vessels ripped out of the ground, quite literally. And we had an extraordinary situation in the tun room where we had 2 vessels which were half full of strong sugars from each of the day's brews. We managed to pump one into the other so that we would have a full vessel to ferment during the flood and hopefully come back to a yeast crop that we could utilise when we got going again. And then we abandoned the brewery, and I climbed over the roof to get back into my home, and the river swirled around for 36 hours. We came back to a scene of devastation, and our loss adjuster came down and reported back to our insurers that we would be out of production for at least 3 months, but most probably 6. But in the event, we turned it round in 9 days. So they were absolutely delighted. Didn't stop them putting up the premiums by 60% the following year, but we soldiered on, and we had a lot going for us. The water hadn't been contaminated. We had a yeast crop in the fermenting room that we could utilise because our yeast stores below had been washed out. And we brewed 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and Lewes just had the stench of river mud through the entire area of cliff. And I went next door home for breakfast at 7, and somebody had put a note through my letterbox, and it simply said, "Lewes has come alive with the smell of brewing." And we thought, yeah, we're going to be all right. The brews that we had combined on the day of the flood were totally unrepresentative of anything we had brewed before, but they did provide the yeast crop for us, and we left it and cooled it down as we would normally. And then the phone didn't stop ringing with brewers large and small offering to help, and Shepherd Neame sent a tanker down and took the brew away, and they bottled it for us, and we called it Ouse Booze. In fact, the name came about through Simon Beer and his wife Beth. Simon was a silversmith in Cliff, and they saw us on the bridge on the day after the waters had dissipated, and said, "Oh, we've all been in the gardeners deciding what you're going to call the calamity brew, the disaster brew." So I said, "Well, how do you know we're going to do one?" And they said, "Well, you always do." So I said, "Well, you know, flood fire, fair enough. What name did you come up with?" And they said, "Ouse Booze." And I said, "Yeah, interesting. Not particularly Harvey's, but I'll give it some thought." So I went back and told people, and they said, "Oh no, we can do better than that." Nobody did. The phone started ringing. "When's the Ouse Booze coming out?" We went with it. Well, 25 years on, we have recreated Ouse Booze, and it is brewed with the same hops from the same hop growers that we were using on that day. and exactly the same strength of beer, and it's a 1 copper brew, so literally strong first copper sugars as we brew that day, and it will be coming out in can, and hopefully will be as well received as the initial one.